Thank you everybody for coming on a beautiful day. There is translation again for those who want translation in French. Feel free to get your system. I will try not to speak too fast, so that not completely dark, because we don't want people sleep. But anyways, I also have a book that's my only book that's done in French, is on popular resistance. If people want copies, talk to us. We can get you a copy of it. But the area I want to talk about is Palestine is part of the Fertile Crescent. It's where we humans first developed agriculture. Jericho, for example, is the oldest continuously inhabited town on earth, 11,000 years of civilization in this. Part of this has to do with geography, part of it has to do with geology and position of the tectonic plates and the way that create the lowest point on earth, for example, in the Dead Sea, and then the mountains that are Mediterranean. So we get a lot of biodiversity. I won't speak too long about these issues. I'm a biologist, so I can go on for hours speaking about animals, which is my favorite. My field is animals. At the museum, of course, we also have people interested in plants. But I do want to say that our ancestors who domesticated animals and plants like wheat and barley, and animals like goat and sheep, and there's goats and sheep out here in the garden. These were first domesticated in this Fertile Crescent. And these ancestors of ours, called Canaanites, and before that Natufian communities, were living in harmony with nature for thousands of years, in relative harmony with nature for thousands of years. So villages like this one is near Tul Karam, a picture taken about 100 years ago, shows the nature of life in those old villages that continued very much unchanged for thousands of years, with the relative preservation of the natural surrounding. And of course, when people developed agriculture, they also have time on their hands, so they invent things like alphabet and philosophy and laws and music and other things, which collectively we call quote-unquote civilization, although I'm not sure we're fully civilized yet as a species. But the alphabet that you use even here comes from us, comes from that part, the Western Asia part, from our Aramaic alphabet that evolved into Arabic alphabet, into Hebrew alphabet, into Latin alphabet, Greek alphabet, and so on. And we, of course, have very rich cultural history. Now I have a project at the museum related to cultural history and natural cultural history. And also, when I say natural cultural history, for example, how people used to do agriculture. And thank you for showing us around the garden, where you were talking, for example, about how people here used to do agriculture. And I think that's important for us to remember, that our ancestors did not do monoculture with thousands of acres or thousands of hectares with the same kind of plant. That's not how people did it before. And so it's important to reclaim this cultural history, which now they speak of it as, fancy terms like permaculture. But of course, we Palestinians have been doing this kind of agriculture for 11,000 years. It's just that there's modern kind of terminologies for these things. Now, we do have some problems in terms of environmental issues we have to deal with in Palestine. Part of these are related to politics. I will try not to speak of politics too much unless you have questions about it later in the question and answer session. But some of the environmental issues are related to political issues. For example, when Israel drained the Hula wetland reserves to try and reclaim that area for agriculture and claim that they are draining the swamps. Of course, swamps are not swamps, really they're wetlands, and Palestine is positioned to be on the migratory route for birds from Eurasia, Europe and Asia to Africa, passing through Palestine. So when you do that, you result in a lot of destruction, and 119 species basically disappeared. Israel has also taken the water of the Jordan Valley from the headwaters from Lake Tiberias, as you can see in the map on the left, and diverted it with the idea that Israel didn't control the whole territory up until 1967 when they also occupied the West Bank. But at the time, most of the Jordan River, you can see, was between Jordan and the West Bank of Jordan, or what is now looked at as a potential future Palestinian state. So they diverted the water to dry up the Jordan Valley, basically. And the Dead Sea has started shrinking very rapidly right after that. This was in the 1950s. And you can see the Dead Sea there is really shrinking quickly. And you can see the effect also on the, even from satellite image, you can tell the effect on it in terms of desertification and the climate in this area. In order to, quote unquote, fix the problem of the Dead Sea shrinking, now they want to take water from the Red Sea via a canal to the Dead Sea. And it's a devastating project that involves pumping the water of the Red Sea up first, and then it goes down and it gets desalinated. The fresh water is used by Israel and Jordan. And then there's hydroelectric plants, etc. And what's left of the desalination is that brine water, they call it, will be dumped into the Dead Sea. This project has a huge environmental impact. All the environmental groups in Palestine, Jordan, Israeli, even environmental groups, they say it's a very bad project. But the World Bank funded it, and the Jordanian government and the Israeli governments approve it, and it's moving on now. It's almost halfway complete. We also face challenges like climate change, where temperature we expect to rise between 2 to 4 degrees centigrade, and the precipitation will decrease by 20-25% in our area, which will have a significant effect on the population. In the Jordan Valley, there are many problems. The fact that there are all these Israeli settlements you see in blue in the Jordan Valley, and Palestinians have been restricted into only 6% of the Jordan Valley with the ranges that are used for shooting military exercises, etc., by Israel has caused devastation in the Jordan Valley. There is the issue of water. Not that we have a shortage of water, we have plenty of water. Actually, there's more rainfall in Ramallah in the West Bank than there is in London. I don't know if you know that. So we do have good rainfall, just like you have here. But the problem is unequal distribution. So we Palestinians get less than what the World Health Organization, you can see, says is healthy for each individual to have. And Israeli settlements get many more than what the World Health Organization said is needed. Environmentally also, there are places better than other places. So the West Bank, even though it's very bad, it's still better than Gaza. Gaza is really huge problems, and this is a report by the United Nations that says that Gaza will be unlivable by 2020. It's actually unlivable now because the water aquifer is already not drinkable water, and there's huge problems with with the people living in Gaza, 2 million people now who are in a small desert strip of land. Now, I could go on and explain many, many other problems. I do want to say that I want to focus more of my talk on the solutions rather than on the problems. But the geopolitical problems are now actually 100 years old in Palestine. They started with the British and the French with the Balfour and the Cambon declarations in 1917 in support of the Zionist project in Palestine. The fact that the population is unstable and the geopolitical structure is unstable also impacts the environment, as I showed you a little bit before. But we also have to think of the demographics, the population, because humans cause problems. 500 Palestinian villages and towns were destroyed when the State of Israel was created. And this created a very large refugee population. Today, 7 million out of 12 million of us Palestinians are refugees or displaced people. And what had happened subsequently geographically to the area is that the Palestinians were restricted into smaller and smaller areas, sort of like what happened to Native Americans in the United States. And this is the population today of Palestinians. There are 12.7 million, nearly 3 million in the West Bank, 2 million in Gaza. Inside the 1948 areas, what's called Israel, is about 1.5 million. In the Arab countries, about 5.5 million, mostly in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. This is the reason I show this picture is because, again, when we think of environmental solutions, we have to also think of solutions to this distribution of people and what's going to happen to them eventually and how to deal with this. That's one reason. A second reason we have to think about this is that poverty and instability affect environmental education and environmental conservation. I show you this graph, which shows the per capita income, GDP, of a country related to index of environmental concern. The poorer people are, the less environmental concerns they possess. That's natural. I don't expect a child in Gaza who's hungry not to kill a bird, for example, or to pick a wild flower, even if it's an endangered flower, to eat it, basically. So poverty is related to environmental concerns, and we have to think about that seriously when we plan environmental conservation in countries like Palestine or other unstable situations like Syria or Afghanistan or Africa, for that matter. Okay, here's where I stop speaking about problems. Diagnosis, if you want. My background is medical genetics, so I like to say, when I was teaching my medical students at Yale University, for example, I would tell them, okay, you take a patient history, you make the right diagnosis, but if you stop there, you're not a good doctor, you know? You have to offer something as a solution, right? So what I want to focus on is a part of the solution, a small part, which is actually what we are doing is remarkably similar to what you are doing here in this center in terms of environmental conservation and using a center as a center of education for children, because we do have to start with children. So the Museum of Natural History that we started about 3 years ago has a mission. The mission includes 3 things: research, education, and conservation. And to promote these ideas in order to have sustainability, basically, that the human is able to live in an environment that's healthy, eats healthy foods, and lives in harmony with nature. So our motto at the museum is respect. Respect for ourselves as human beings. We can do things, even under occupation, even under poverty, even under whatever other circumstances there are, we should be able to do something. This is self-empowerment or respect for oneself. The second is respect for others. We respect other human beings, regardless of whether they are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, whatever, atheists. My family is Christian, by the way, although I'm mixed. My father is Greek Orthodox. My mother is Lutheran. My wife is Chinese American. Her family is Buddhist. My son was born in Lubbock, Texas, so he's a redneck, I guess, in the US. And my sister went to Utah to get her master's degree, and she became a Mormon. And I have cousins who became Muslim, and my son is actually dating a Jewish girl now, so every week he dates another kind of girl. But anyway, so I may have Jewish grandchildren, you never know. Okay, but that's the beauty. By the way, this is my philosophy, and I'll say it, I said it the other day when we were sitting over dinner, is diversity is strength. Biodiversity, for example, ecosystems. When we see diversity, that means it's a healthy ecosystem. When we see one species dominate over an area, that's not a healthy ecosystem. That's not stable. Even for the species that's dominant. Even the species that's dominant for now will not stay in that society because it cannot. It's interdependent. The same for human societies. Societies that promote uniformity, all the same kind of people, usually are not stable and they don't last. I don't need to remind you of examples in history like apartheid in South Africa or the Nazi Germany's lasted 12 years, etc. They don't last because it's unstable. Societies that respect diversity of its members are societies that are more stable. And so I believe in this concept of diversity, and I believe it's very important to protect and promote diversity. So that's where we come respect for others, and then of course the third level is respect for nature, animals and plants. Okay, I mentioned we do research, education and conservation. Let's start with research. We publish many papers. We published, I think, in the past 2 years, 22 papers, research papers on various topics. I even have undergraduate students publishing papers with me on various topics. And I let people do whatever research they want, but I tell them try to make your research relevant to society, not this abstract research in some area that's not relevant to what we do. So here is, for example, research that we do. This is an area between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, between the town I live in Bethlehem, Bethlehem University, and Jerusalem, and what it used to look like in 1997 on the top, and what it looks like today. Basically, it's a concrete jungle now. So what is the impact of this on biodiversity? So we study this kind of thing. This is a paper about decline in vertebrate biodiversity. Sibylla, by the way, was a German intern who came with us, and we do accept interns and volunteers, and we provide them with food and place to stay. If any of you want to volunteer, ahlan wa sahlan. And Sibylla decided to work on biodiversity and published this paper with us. We publish on birds and bird migrations. As I mentioned, Palestine is situated in very strategic bottleneck for bird migration. 500 million birds pass over Palestine on annual migration. We published on amphibians, and amphibians in the West Bank are actually good indicators of quality of water. That's why I was asking you about the frogs in the pool here. We published on scorpions. We published on butterflies in the West Bank. This paper on butterflies was done by Muhammad Abu Sarhan, who was in his first year of college, freshman basically in college. Imagine first year being able to publish a paper. We did studies on land snails of Palestine, different species. We did studies on freshwater snails, again, good indicators of pollution. For example, that snail G is found mostly in polluted waters. So it is a very important indicator. We published also on the role of museums and botanical gardens in terms of environmental education, in terms of environmental conservation and so forth, how best to use these places like this one for educating people. And the lessons we learned, we try to tell other people and by publishing them. And already some of these papers, even though they're all new, these 3 papers are just published in the last 2 months. And when we published those papers, I already got many requests for them, people asking for communicating with us from places like Kenya and Tanzania and other countries, and also from countries in Iraq. I got an interest from a person there at the university who says, I would like to do what you do, which is to create a museum and an educational garden to do this. We also study the effect of Israeli activities and human activities in general. For example, we studied this in the International Journal of Environmental Studies, 2 papers relating to human impacts on the environment. Genotoxic effects of Israeli industrial settlements. For example, they dump their toxic waste on us, and this increases cancers and birth defects and infertility. And we saw this directly with the effect on the chromosomes and the DNA, etc. So I already mentioned this. Now, when you are doing activism, there are prices to pay, and I have already lost 19 of my friends who are helping us in our work. This is the last one I lost, and he happens to be somebody who's a pharmacologist and who worked with us on this research on the museum and environmental issues. His name is Basil Laraj, the one wearing the T-shirt that says boycott, divestment, sanctions. Now, I wanted to make this a short speech because I want to leave plenty of time for question and answer, and also because the video sometimes is much better than slides. So I want to now show you this video, and it's only about 9 minutes. So, okay, so we have more than 1 hour to ask questions. And the reason we designed it this way is because I'm sure I covered just some areas that might be interesting to some of you. Some of you may be interested in other areas or want to know about more detail about any of the areas that are covered. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, there's a sign-up sheet that passed around. Please put your email on it at least, so that we can stay in touch. But I also have brochures here. If people want to get them on the way out, or my card, they are welcome to get them. Okay? Yes? Yeah, I mean, there is obviously, just like we did with South Africa, we obey the boycott, divestment, sanctions rules, which stipulate that we cannot cooperate with Israeli universities or institutions that support apartheid. But we do have relationships with Israelis, individuals and scientists and environmentalists. And they come, even last week before I came here, there were 55 Israeli activists who came to the museum and the botanical garden and listened to talk similar to what I give you. And more detail even. And so we really covered a lot of areas, and we discussed these things. And some of them choose to become activists in the struggle with us. And so I actually I got arrested many times for my political activism. As I told you, I'm a troublemaker. But half the times I was arrested with Israelis who work with us. for human rights, for justice, especially on issues of environmental justice, like the wall and the settlements that are destroying agricultural lands that have been in operation for thousands of years. So we do work with Israelis and individuals, not as institutions. You mean like for the Israelis and the Palestinians to care about the environmental issues? Yeah, as I mentioned, poverty has a lot to do with it. So when people are very poor, I don't expect them to be environmentally aware. I mean, I try to make them environmentally active and aware, but it's more difficult than if they are more comfortable economically. So there are ways to go around that. And one of the ways to go around that is to make sure that environmental conservation is economically beneficial to people. So that's why we got into areas like permaculture, aquaculture, things like that, because I can show people that they can raise their vegetables, their crops, even on walls in refugee camps, for example, or ceilings, roofs of refugee camps. I have now in the refugee camp in Bethlehem, in Aida refugee camp, I have people growing fish on their roof top. So it is possible to think of strategies and techniques to empower people and at the same time show them the importance of environmental conservation. And this is how we are approaching it now, is a dual track of food security, environmental concerns together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. First of all, the Red Sea, Dead Sea Canal is sitting right smack in the fault region between the continental plates of Africa and Arabia. That's what made the Jordan Valley and the Great Rift Valley, which goes from Syria all the way to Tanzania and Kenya, the Red Sea. This area, because it's moving at different rates, every few years you get major earthquakes. And actually we are due for a very major, very big earthquake. The biggest earthquake in the last 200 years was in 1927. And if you look at the periods before that, about every 80 to 100 years you get a big earthquake. So we're expecting a big earthquake in Palestine, Jordan area soon. And imagine what an earthquake will do to a canal that's bringing water up and down and the Dead Sea. It's going to be devastating. That's one aspect. The other aspect is to pump water from the Red Sea out is itself damaging to the Red Sea. Red Sea has beautiful coral reefs and many endangered species. Very unique habitat, by the way. There are many endemic species in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aqaba, or what they call Gulf of Eilat on the Israeli side. But this will be devastating. There's archaeological sites on the way that are going to be removed completely, including the first places where humans got copper. The copper age, as I call it, started right there. And so that will be destroyed. There are many, many other issues that affect the Wadi Araba itself has endangered species. And imagine putting a canal in the middle of it. You know, animals don't migrate according to borders, by the way. They move across borders. So the animals of the Wadi Araba, which move east to west all the time, now will not be able to move east to west. And there are many other areas that we looked at, and we see the impact will be very devastating to people, to the environment, and so forth. But they got billions of dollars from the World Bank, and there are people who are going to get rich, and that's how life operates sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, the way that these work in many parts of the world, by the way, is you can buy your environmental impact assessment to suit your needs. And the environmental impact assessment that they published, which is actually in that figure I showed of the Red Sea, Dead Sea Canal, it's by EcoConsult and others. really, as somebody, I mean, if this was a report from one of my students, I would give him an F or her an F. It's totally useless. It has no connection to reality. These people didn't even visit the Wadi Araba. Don't know anything about biodiversity in Wadi Araba. And they didn't think of the currents in the Red Sea. They didn't think of the Dead Sea itself. The Dead Sea, by the way, the water of the Dead Sea is very different than the water that's going to be affluent coming off of a desalination plant. What's the impact of that on the chemistry of the water and the life around the Dead Sea? And there is life around the Dead Sea, even though it's named the Dead Sea, because actually the water itself only has bacteria that live in the salty areas. But around the Dead Sea is very rich habitat. And what is the impact of this water that's coming off of desalination plants going to be on the area there? And what happens if there's an earthquake and it spills? This water spills on the Wadi Araba. They didn't look at any of this. It was just a total, I don't know how to describe it, bullshit in English, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I explained about how they diverted the waters of the head area of the Jordan Valley into the areas that are here, basically in this area, which is the northern Naqab area and the areas around Gaza. And this diversion of water has itself economically makes no sense. Environmentally itself was damaging, by the way, even not counting what it did to the Jordan Valley, which, by the way, the Jordan River is no longer a river. Literally, it's a stream now. There's actually many streams here around this area that are bigger than the Jordan Valley. You could walk across the Jordan Valley, the Jordan River, and the water would not come up even to your knee now, because the water level has dropped significantly, because Israel took the water out of there. But economically, this didn't make sense, by the way, because they brought the water into these areas. These areas were already being cultivated by the Palestinians who were kicked out of these areas. And they were cultivated with things like wheat and barley and lentils and other things. And there's plenty of water, rainfall water here. They don't need the water here. Now they said they made the desert bloom by doing this, that they made this area bloom. It's not real, okay? The cucumber grown here costs more than 10 times more than what they sell it for. So actually, and that's when you count, of course, the cost of building this canal and all this stuff. So it economically didn't make sense, environmentally didn't make sense, socially didn't make sense, of course. Politically, it made some sense because they dried up the Jordan Valley and made people on both sides, the Jordanians and the Palestinians, here more impoverished. So that's part of the reason that they did this. So that's why they did it, and that's why the Dead Sea shrank, because no more this Jordan Valley dumps the right quantities to replace the evaporation of the Dead Sea. Yes, pesticides is a big problem, and you are right. Israel makes pesticides that are banned internationally and markets them in this captive market of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. You see, we are a captive market. We're not allowed to import anything without Israeli permission. So Israel basically makes $12 billion out of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, because most products in the West Bank and Gaza that are sold are Israeli products, and we're not allowed to develop our own products or our own systems of industry has been wiped out basically for us, a system of de-development. But as a captive market, they can sell us anything. And they even sell us pesticides that are forbidden inside the Green Line, inside Israel itself. They sell it to Palestinians because they don't care about our health. They care about their health. which is stupid, of course, because many of these pesticides, they don't, again, pesticides like animals, they don't respect borders. They go back and forth. So, and there are many Israelis who live in the West Bank. There are 750,000 Israelis who live inside the West Bank, right next to us. So when we spray a certain pesticide that Israel allows into the West Bank and forbids inside the Green Line, these pesticides also affect the settlers. So yes, we see cancer rates going up. We see, again, congenital birth defects going up. We see infertility going up among Palestinians. That's probably the main reason they like it, is to reduce our population. So it is an intentional policy of affecting the health of the native Palestinians. And of course, when we get sick, we don't even have good health care in the West Bank, so we have to go to Israeli hospitals, which demand cash up front. And I have relatives who had to sell their house so that they can get treatment, because Israel is very expensive to treat patients with cancer or things like that. But they had no option because they're not allowed anywhere else. So Israel profits also from Palestinians being sick, if you want. And so this is something that is a problem for us. Now, in terms of the first thing you said about compost, I wasn't clear what. So in composting, again, what we try to do is think of all these problems, but think of what we as Palestinians can do to deal with them. Okay, so let me start with the insecticides. What we Palestinians can do with it, I can show Palestinians that they can grow things without pesticides by using biological controls. And there are many biological methods for controlling pests on plants. And so if I show them these examples, and I show them that they work on a demonstrative farm, which is our field that you saw in the film. And they try it. I tell them, okay, you don't have to try it in all your field. Try it in small corner and see what happens. And if they see that it works, it saves them money anyway because they don't have to pay for the insecticide. So So they adopt it, and this is one way that I can help them deal with this issue. In terms of the compost, the same thing. Now we are forced to buy Israeli fertilizers. Israeli fertilizers are harmful, harmful to the environment. So I tell the farmers, why do you need to buy these bad fertilizers that are going to, okay, they may produce higher yield for a year or two, but then your land will crash. So no, use organic fertilizers from compost, and you can see actually, and again, you can demonstrate it on a part of your farm for 3 or 4 years, and then if it works, you can apply it to the rest. And I tell them, look at how much agricultural products, how much organic material we Palestinians dump into the garbage. 60% of solid waste, 60% of solid waste is actually organic material. Peels of potatoes and onions and kitchen scraps and things like that. This 60% could reduce our waste by 60%, and you take it and you compost it and you produce natural fertilizer. That's wonderful. That works miracles in your crops and on your, and again, saves you money. So why would you want to do the other way? This is how I do it. I do it by thinking of simple solutions that empower the people. And in a way, this is a form of resistance also. Because in a way, people staying on their land, even under very difficult circumstances of occupation and colonization, becomes a form of resistance. And it's a beautiful form of resistance because it provides you with food, healthy, organic products, etc. So Gaza is the strip of land that's on the Mediterranean coast. The question is about Gaza and the situation in Gaza. And I have many friends in Gaza. They always call me asking for all sorts of help and support, and it's really very, very difficult in Gaza. Gaza was never a desert region, by the way. There used to be a valley, Gaza Valley, Wadi Gaza. Wadi Gaza brought water from the mountains of Hebron all the way to the Mediterranean coast. And Wadi Gaza was actually a river. At its height, it was even as strong as the Jordan River. So Gaza had plenty of water. Israel just simply cut off that, because they can do that on their side, put dams and finish. Okay? So what started to happen, also with the rise in human population in Gaza, and the rise in human population is because 2/3 of the Gaza people are actually refugees. They don't belong in Gaza. So when I say 2 million people are in Gaza, about 1.2 million of them, more than that slightly, are actually refugees from 1948 areas. So you tripled the population in Gaza via creating a prison, basically, of people in Gaza. And you deprive them of water so that they don't have access to that runoff, that water that comes there. Their population increases dramatically because of natural growth also, because also another sociological phenomena well known, and you know it, is that the more poor people are, the more children they have. My wife and I are not poor, so we have one son. My sister is much poorer than me, so she had 4 children. I don't know why. Maybe people don't have time, don't have money for TV or something, so they have children. But anyways, poverty makes more children. So Gaza, being impoverished, started increasing in population. Increased population means increased water usage. Increased water usage with less water because Wadi Gaza is shut off means more extraction from the aquifer. More extraction from the aquifer made the aquifer drop. And so now it's salty and there's no more water aquifer. It's a huge problem. And it is not sustainable. And everybody knows it's not sustainable. And Israel once in a while will sell water to Gaza. Imagine they stop the water from going to Gaza, and then they sell them their own water. They do the same thing in the West Bank. In the West Bank, I get water when the Israelis decide I'm allowed water. So, and when they do that, they charge me for it. They charge us for our own water. And they charge us actually more than 5 times what they charge the Israeli settlers for water. So, so it is a system that's intended on impoverishing people and making them suffer economically, environmentally, in many other ways. And this is naturally you expected in situations like this of colonialism, that the natives are unwanted, so they are pressured to leave, basically. So I don't know what will happen in Gaza, but I assure you, if they don't already their malnutrition in Gaza is very, very high and going higher. And I expect people to start dying very soon of hunger and malnutrition. And maybe if they start to die by the thousands, then the world will wake up and do something. But I hope it happens before that, because it's very, very difficult. So the question, again, I repeat for the care of the guy who's translating, that is this knowledge of previous methods of agriculture being lost? And the answer is yes. And if we don't act on them very quickly, we will lose a lot of that knowledge. Because, for example, all the refugees that were kicked out of their villages, Some of the villages, for example, were along the shore, and they had particular ways of fishing that are environmentally responsible. So, some were, in the mountains, and they have particular ways of dealing with producing things in the mountain. All of them were made refugees, or most of them. So they stopped practicing this because now they live in refugee camps. And this is since 1948. So we're talking 70 years, almost 69 years. So the old generation is losing this knowledge and dying. So we have to reclaim this knowledge. I actually have a project that was approved in first reading from the British Council related to precisely that, to gather oral history and also written history and preserve it as part of our museum, what I call ethnoecology, ethnobotany, ethnozoology. And so this important knowledge needs to be preserved, and we are working on it. I hope this grant finally comes through, because it will give me the resources to quickly collect a lot of information. And I know of a lot of places where I can start, including in the refugee camps, which have people. And even, my own mother is 85 years old. And she knows, she still knows, remarkable. She goes to the field with me and she can tell me this plant is used for this cough or for this or that medicinal plant uses, or this is how we eat this. This is edible mushroom. This is not edible mushroom. All of this knowledge is going to be lost if we don't document it and save it. And I hope we are going to do that very quickly with the support of this grant. But even if this grant doesn't come, I do want to proceed on this. So I'll find some volunteers to go out and start collecting information. On climate change. So the question is about the role of Palestinians in climate change.
Did you take part at the...
Yeah, COP21 in Morocco. The Palestinian Authority had representatives there. Let me be very blunt. The Palestinian Authority is like the Vichy government for us, and so I don't think that they really care too much about the environment. They care more about keeping their own positions, and so they were trying to work with the Palestinian Authority anyway. And we do have an environmental quality authority, and the head of this environmental quality authority was in Morocco. And before she went, I called her and I said, here's what I think you should say, here's what I think are important things. I don't think she paid much attention to what I provided her with information. Anyways, the Israeli Minister of Environment was there, and he actually ridiculed the Palestinian Authority in front of them. And I felt very bad, because if they had listened to me and prepared, this would not have happened. But c'est la vie, as you guys say in French. So we struggled. There is a project that I want to work on related to climate change. But it's grassroots, not top-down, not Palestinian Authority, anything. It's grassroots. I want the people of the various villages to do adaptation strategies to the coming climate change. And there are ways to do this. There are ways, even at the edge of a desert, where desertification is coming towards us, to plant some trees. Doesn't cost too much. Few seeds, take care of them for 2 or 3 years. But once they take root, they provide a barrier, basically, against desertification coming. Composting is working against climate change. Using less fossil fuel, using, I noticed you guys also here have solar power. We are using solar power at our botanical garden. This is also a form of independence from Israel, if you want to think of it politically, but if you want to think of it also environmentally, it's wonderful that we don't have to burn fuel to make electricity. But since Israel controls the electricity and makes us pay for the electricity, and they are now going to cut the electricity in Gaza, I told people in Gaza, use the tunnels to smuggle solar panels. Solar panels are not very expensive nowadays. You can build a nice system for a few $1,000s and be electricity independent. Wind power, you can use wind power. There's a guy in Gaza who actually invented a wind turbine power and created it, and now generates electricity for his own house from the wind on top of his building. So I think there are ways, again, for us to do some things as grassroots, as people, not waiting for the Palestinian Authority or the Israeli government or whoever to see the light or become decent human beings at one point. I don't want to wait, I think they understand when I say it's like the BC government. I don't need to elaborate. Basically, the Palestinian Authority was created as part of the Oslo process. And the Oslo process, the text of it, if you read the Oslo agreements, Oslo 1 and Oslo 2, the text of it was written many years before by the Israeli government. It was intended to create an authority in name only, but authority as a self-governing body for the Palestinians to do education, healthcare, and pick up our own garbage so that Israel doesn't have to do with this. So basically, this way they can make the occupation very profitable, because occupations are usually costly. They cost money to do occupation because you have to take care of the population and you have to provide security. Well, in this case, they don't have to do anything. They only profit. Even security for them, and the Palestinian Authority spends 43% of its budget on security. What security for whom? Of course, not for the Palestinians. Security for the Israelis, so that they can protect Israel from any Palestinian demonstration or attack or whatever. So when I go out in demonstrations towards Israelis, the first security force I have to face is not the Israeli security force. It's the Palestinian police that prevents Palestinians from demonstrating. This happens all the time. So this is why I say it's like the Vichy government. It's just a subcontractor, if you want. You know that term, subcontractor? Subcontractor for the occupation. Yes, and we pay for it. The international community pays for it. European Union pays for it. I mean, my recommendations for the Palestinian politicians is the same as my recommendation for Israeli politicians or American politicians, or even today I met with some politicians here, and it's the same recommendation, which is that politics should not be about short-term interests of that particular politician, and that politicians who speak about human rights, international law, environmental justice, should practice it, should do what they speak. They cannot just speak those words. They must mean something. So it is not just specific to Palestinian politicians. Many politicians, they do this, they put their finger in the air, see where the wind is blowing, and one day you find them here, and the other day you find them there. And they can change positions because they are interested only in one thing only, which is themselves and their position. They're not interested in environment or anything else. So my recommendation is for them to have principles and stick to those principles. And I actually prefer some right-wing politicians because they do have certain principles, even though I disagree with those principles, and they stick to them more than many left-wing politicians. So so I say, okay, take a position, and if you say you want to support human rights, you support equality, then stick to that position. If you say you are for purity of race or whatever, stick to that position. I don't care, but that's where I am in terms of politicians. I find politicians usually respond only to one thing, which is public pressure. In the United States, for example, if you think, because I am a US citizen, I can speak against my own government. The United States, which is the biggest perpetrator of evil in the world, the biggest exporter of violence in the world, as Martin Luther King said, is the United States, killed millions and millions of people. But if you look at the positive things that happened in the United States, how did they happen? Think, for example, women's right to vote happened only in the 1920s. Think of the civil rights in the US, happened in the 1950s and 60s. Think of ending the war in Vietnam. Think of 40-hour work weeks. Used to be 80 hours work weeks. Nobody asked. Think of social security. Think of environmental laws. All of these things, the positive things that happened in America, happened how? Wasn't by some politician suddenly getting inspiration from God, or it was by pressure, by the people pushing them, kicking and screaming, sometimes dragging those politicians. So I am when I said I'm a troublemaker, I'm one of the people who pushes, and I push very hard. And there are 4 governments, by the way, that question me. Israel, of course, arrested me many times. The United States twice, they questioned me, FBI and Homeland Security. Jordan once, the intelligence of Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority once. Okay? So there are 4 governments that don't like me, which means I'm doing a good job. So I'm grateful. So that's how I look at it, is you have to be pushing in a direction that you believe in, regardless of the consequences. And politicians don't show spine, so we need to make sure that they have spine. And we need to protect those of them who are decent politicians, sometimes rarely, once in a million maybe, politician decent. We need to provide protection for them and support for them. And that's how I think we need to operate related to politicians, regardless of who they are, whether Palestinian or Israeli or anybody else. I think you had a question there, didn't you? No? Okay. Yes, absolutely, because it all starts locally. You know, we think globally and we act locally. So how is young people are the ones who are going to change society. Just the other day, a man comes into the museum and he looks at me with a straight face and he shakes my hand and says, "Hi, I'm Muhammad such and such. What did you do to my daughter?" And I'm like, "What did I do to your daughter?" Well, nothing, I didn't do it. What are you talking about? He says, "Well, she came to your museum and your botanical garden, and now she's this environmental nut, and she doesn't want me to smoke, and she wants me to keep the garden clean and everything else." I said, "So are you upset about this?" He said, No, I just came here to thank you for this, because you made her make an impact on us, the whole family now. So I said, "Great, I'm doing my job, because this is what it is about. Is a child can affect an adult, much more, by the way, than the other way around. So I think it's really important that we work with children. And in that way, I say it's preparing for the future. Before we started the museum, before 3 years ago, I actually was, my activism was more directed towards demonstrations and politics and speaking like this internationally. I used to travel 4 or 5 times a year internationally. Now, and Natalie can tell you, even correspondence, I said, I'm not sure I want to come because I want to stay around here, etc. So I reduce how much I travel and how much I involve politically, because I decided to shift my energy from these kinds of things towards the children, working with the children, because I think it makes a much more of an impact. And I'm sure here at this center, they see that impact on the children who come here and interact with them and learn about the environment and protection and so forth. And not just in terms of the environment, animals and plants, but I think, I am sure of this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you have some sheep and goats here, and you say petting zoo kind of thing, where children come and take care of an animal. Children who take care of an animal are much more compassionate to fellow human beings than children who don't get exposed to that. So it provides that level of caring. When you have caring, I care. I care about animals. I care about plants. I care about other human beings. I have respect for them. I go back to this issue of respect, because when you have respect, it's a huge difference in the politics of, if you want, the politics of the world. Now we see it now. I mean, any of you turns on the news. Why is Hollywood such a bad influence on people? Because they don't teach you respect. They teach you to shoot anybody who disagrees with you. After all, Arnold Schwarzenegger does it in his movies. So there's bad guys, good guys, white hats, black hats, Indians, cowboys, and they shoot it out. And there's always a hero, there's always a good side, and there's always a bad side. And the good side somehow always wins. And it's not reality, it's not the world. The world we live in is not like that. There's no good sides, bad sides, good people, bad people. Sorry, there is no such thing. There are people who do bad things, but they are not bad people. And every one of us has good angel here, bad angel here, and we have to decide what we support, So the question is, how can we as individuals, and not just in Luxembourg, in my view, around the world, and in Palestine also, how can we as individuals make a difference? And do we have another hour? I'll try to be brief. I'll think of something brief. On my website, actually, Qumsiyeh.org, my last name.org, I have 67 ways you can help. But you can read those if you want. But briefly, I think that, first of all, the most important thing is to get accurate information. Learn about situations. So to do that, you can read from here if you don't want to come for a visit. But you're also welcome to come for a visit. I know several of you have come to Palestine. And I encourage you to do that, because there's nothing better than seeing it on the ground for yourself, to see what the reality is. And we welcome you, especially if you want to volunteer in the garden. We even provide you with food and house and everything to live in. So you're welcome. But even if you want just come for a few days just to see the situation, you're welcome. We can accommodate you. So by seeing and by understanding a situation is very important for getting the truth, to know the truth. But that's not enough, obviously. You have to then do something with this information. And you can simply expand the information to other people, tell them about what is going on. And certainly we welcome any help you can provide. whether it's volunteering, for example, or networking us with people. For example, we're going to go see the museums and the botanical gardens and agricultural areas. Or by, and you can volunteer also from here. You don't have to volunteer from there. In any area you are in. For example, if you are in media, you can help us, connect us and expose the story that works. If you like writing, you can write letters to your newspaper. If you like, if you are religious, you can go to the churches, speak to them. We Palestinian Christians have produced a document called the Kairos document, which is about the role of the world Christian community in the struggle, and why we think the Christian churches should get involved in advocating for environmental justice, for human rights, things like that. And you can also support by expertise in particular areas. If you have an expertise in permaculture or agriculture, or you guys here have expertise in botanical gardens or whatever, you can certainly advise us and help us. You can donate money if you want. Obviously, we welcome that. As I mentioned in the film, we started this botanical garden museum only with our own money. We didn't want any foreign money because we wanted to set an agenda that's Palestinian environmental agenda, not dependent on what the donor wants, what a particular European donor wants. So we started with our own money. My wife and I donated the big chunk of it, about $250,000, and then donations from friends and colleagues, another $100,000, and that's how we operated. For the past 3 years, we've been drawing on this money, basically, and we will run out if we don't get now grants and other support in about 2 years. So we are expecting that more and more donation, and we are getting some support now internationally. I'm starting to get grants. As I told you, we submitted a grant to the British Council. We had a grant from the Canadian Consulate for Education, and we have some exchange through Erasmus program where we get Europeans to come and help us in particular areas. I have an exchange with the University of Siena, Italy, where they came to Palestine. I went to Italy. I helped them in their education and vice versa. So there are many ways. I mean, as I said, I could speak long time about this, but if you want, email me or leave me your email address and tell me what your skills or what your interests are. Again, it doesn't have to be financial donation. It can be in expertise or networking or many areas you can help us with. Yeah, so for example, the paper I showed you that was published in the International Journal of Environmental Studies, a very famous journal, peer-reviewed, case-controlled study where it clearly demonstrates that toxic waste dumped from the Israeli settlement affects human health and affects the environment. So the first group I took the paper to was actually the Palestinian Authority. And I said, here, you have resource that you can use to challenge Israel and say, stop it, stop dumping a toxic waste. I think I gave them the paper 3.5 years ago, and I call them about every 2 months, and I beg them, and they are not doing anything. So what does that mean? Am I going to stop and just accept this? No. So I started sending the paper out to international health organizations, to people around the world. And Israel is not very happy about this. Israel is not happy about my activities, and they do many things to try and stop my activities. I think the only reason I'm a little more protected than other Palestinians and I'm not in jail already is because I have an American passport. That's maybe the only reason why I am a little more protected than other Palestinians. even though the American passport doesn't even allow me to enter Jerusalem because I'm Palestinian. So they do not accept it as a document to enter Jerusalem with it. Even though I was a high school teacher in Jerusalem, I'm not allowed into Jerusalem. But anyway, at least the American passport gives me some level of protection in terms of prosecution, etc. Because I'm, what are they, they charge me many times. They take me to court and they charge me with quote unquote incitement. I am inciting you now, by the way. So, another charge. But this is the reality that we face now. So I always tell my students, I don't have all the answers, I tell them also when I don't give lectures, by the way, I have interactive classes, because I don't have all the answers, and much of what I know may be wrong also. So it's important for people to develop that self-empowerment. I tell them, you can think of ways better than I can. Why should I come up with answers? So to answer your question, there are many things I don't know. I don't know how to proceed with this paper, for example, to carry it forward. So I'm exploring, and maybe one of you has an idea. Maybe I should go to the International Court of Justice on my own. Can I? I don't know. I need legal advice. If any of you has expert in international affairs, maybe John does, can tell me whether I can go to International Court of Justice as an individual when the Palestinian Authority is not willing to do it on my behalf as a Palestinian. So maybe we can think of ways. Maybe somebody else can think of another way to approach this. I'm just giving it as an example. But in everything else, this is the way I approach it. There's a guy, for example, that works with us on bees. He taught himself to do bees. I personally know nothing about bees. I sat down, read some things, but I don't know anything. And he learned about bees, and not only did he learn about bees, one day he came to me and he says, Professor Qumsiyeh, he's one of my students, says, you're having me take care of bees. I have a problem. There's wasps. They are eating the bees. I said, well, Muhammad, you're a smart guy. Think about an answer. I don't know the answer. Look on the internet, Google. Think of something without using chemicals. I said to him, I don't want to use chemicals. I'm sure they have chemicals for that. So 2 weeks later, he came up with a trap. He invented it. A trap for the wasps that came in. The wasp comes in, and after the bees inside, the bees can go out, but the wasp can't go out, so the wasps die naturally, no chemicals whatsoever. He invented it. And so I was so happy with this. I said, look, we need to take pictures of this, take it to all the beekeepers in the West Bank, show them that they can make this simple trap for wasps. So the point I'm trying to make is I don't have the answers to everything, and I expect that students and others get empowered to start to think of their own solutions. Maybe they are not doing everything at the core, and maybe we're not going to free Palestine or whatever, but we can certainly do certain things, and better do something than say, what can I do? I'm just a Palestinian individual. No, everybody can do something. It goes back to Zainab's question about doing things. Everybody can do something somewhere, I'm sure. Every one of you can do something. So there's 50 people here. So if tomorrow each one of you does an action related to, doesn't have to be just Palestine, can be about the environment in your neighborhood. If each one of you does just one simple action tomorrow, if each one of you writes a letter to your, you have what, a president or a prime minister? And write to them and say, what about the Palestinian prisoners that are on hunger strike, 1,600 of them? If tomorrow each one of you writes a letter, we have 50 letters, right? That's action. So hopefully that would work. Again, example, but you can do something small every day is better than not doing anything. Thank you.
I think this is a good.
Okay. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.